The neshama should have an aliyah. Okay. So yesterday we learned a beautiful Gemara about Goliath and about where Goliath came from and where Goliath had a source that allowed him for 40 days to taunt and to torment Klal Yisrael. So we had in our Gemara in Rashi, it's because of the 40 days that Moshe went up to get the Torah, and that the Marsha explains it's Zelu Mazeh Kedusha Keneged the Tumah. But Tosfos brings up shot is that since Arpa took 40 steps together with Nomi before she departed, those 40 steps is what empowered Goliath later on to taunt Klal Yisrael for 40 days. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we were up to it's like a halfway down in the wide lines on Daf Mem Beis Amud Beis, and referring to the Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us that the Kohen told Klal Yisrael, some really powerful people started up with us, but we don't come with Gebura of a person, we come with the Gebura of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and they ended up falling. Goliath was one great person who ended up falling, V'nafal Amoy, and his nation fell with him. And Shoivech was another great who also was representing his people, the Bnei Amoy, and they thought that through him they'll win, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu took him out as well, and Klal Yisrael won, and him and his nation fell. But you, Klal Yisrael, you're coming with the Gevurah of Hashem Yisparach, and therefore you will triumph. So let's see the Gemara. Bnei Amoy bo b'nitzchoino shel Shoivech. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk Shoivech. Ksiv, in a different pasuk, the same person is referred to as Shoifech, someone who pours. Rav Shmuel, it's a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Chadamer Shoifech Shemoi. His name was really Shoifech. V'lama nikra Shemoi Shoifech. She'asuk Shoifech. Shoifech is a big chicken coop. It was big and tall and strong, so he was built very big and strong. That's one pshat. Another pshat in Shoivech is a Shoivech is a big chicken coop, but it has multiple little places for different birds to set up their nests. So too, army pants have pockets all around, and there's regular pockets, and there's pockets along the thigh, pockets by the knee, pockets by the shin. So too, this fellow Shoivech he had all the different weapons. He was fully adorned. The Chadamar Shoivech Shema. His name was really Shoivech. The Laman Nikra Shema Shoivech. The reason why he was called Shoivech is Shekol Haraya Oisai. He induced such fear by his mere sight, by just being seen by him. Nishbach Lefanov Kekitoi. A person would just will fall and melt like a jug of water. It says in the pasuk Ashbasai. Normally, the word Ashbasai means it could mean one of two things. Normally, it means his quiver, where he keeps his arrows. Ashbasai could also mean his garbage. So Ashbasai Kekever Pesuach is like an open grave. Kulam Giborim. Zok the Heilige Gemara Rabbi Shmuel V'Amila Rab Ami V'Rabasi. Chadamar V'Shah Shazarkin Chaitz. Whenever he would throw an arrow, Oisin Ashbasai Ashbasai Shal Chalolim. He killed so many people with his arrows that when he took to shooting arrows, there would be mounds and mounds of corpses. V'Shem Etoymar She'omnin B'Krerep, as Rashi says, maybe they're highly skilled. They're highly skilled. Aval Einam Giborim. So they're highly skilled marksmen. They're sharpshooters, and therefore they're able to hit their target. But who said they're Giborim as well? Talmud Loimer Kulam Giborim. They were strong as well. That was one manda. They're so big. These people were so huge. When one of these people would go to the bathroom, it would literally create a new mountain range, like the Rockies. So They named the mountain range after every time they went to the bathroom. Hi, did it ever occur to you that someone who has such type of excretions might have a problem? The Shevet Taimar Mipnei Shechaylim Ayimim, maybe they got a problem. Talmud Loimar Kulam Giborim. They're all Giborim. So this must be the fact that they create mountain ranges must be due to the fact that they're huge, not that they're ill. Omer of Mori, from this discussion, Shmamino, high-minded nafishivli, if someone has too much coming out of him and he's not a huge person, so it's a lot more is coming out of him than should, he's got a problem with the stomach. If someone constantly has to call the plumber because his pipes got plugged, maybe he should see a doctor. Why is this important information? Why do I need to know this? He better, this is a symptom of something that's not good. So he better seek medical advice so that it shouldn't get worse. The pasuk says, Daiga blavish yasichena. Yasichena could mean two different things. And Rashi suggests it could be yasichena midaitoi, just push it out of your mind. But it could also mean yasichena lacherim, you should share it with others. Zok tehele gemara, Daiga blavish yasichena, Rab Ami v'Rabasi. Chadamar yasichena midaitoi. You shouldn't allow worry to take you down. However, ayin via asad adayin via haybeker ayin. So why worry? Chadamar yasichena lacherim. To the contrary, by sharing it with others, that'll make it easier. There are those who say by sharing it with others, they'll daven for you, and that chus will help you. So one shouldn't conceal his concerns by if he can't put them out of his mind by sharing, it will help him resolve those problems. But the atem iatem king, you are not relying. You Klal Yisrael are not relying on the glue of man. You're relying on the Rabban Yisrael. Now, what the Gemara is asking, Rashi explains, is Omer lehem umahi haftocha zu sheftichon. What is this haftocha that the Kohen quotes? And he says as follows: Ki Hashem Elokeichem hahoylech. This is the Kadosh Baruch who's going with you. Why was it necessary to say that? All it needed to say was, Ki Hashem Elokeichem imachem. The Kohen Gadol could have told them that you don't need to worry, the Rebbeinu Shalom is with you. You need such specific detail. He's coming with you into battle. Umahi halicha zu the basham haylech mamish. What is this halicha that the Kohen is saying that the Rebbeinu Shalom is literally coming with you into battle? The Shem and all the Kenuvish, in other words, the Kol Torah is Munachim Ba'aron, is in the Aron that they took out with them to war. So therefore, it mentions the pasuk of Haylech Imahem because literally the Torah, the Kenuvim of the Rebbeinu Shalom were coming with Klal Yisrael to battle. V'chein hu omer, it also says in the pasuk, Vayishlach Oisam Moshe Elef Lamata Latzava Oisam Bes Pinchas. So the Gemara darshans. Oisam is referring to Elu Sanhedrin. How does Oisam refer to Sanhedrin? So the Ben Yoyada says that Es Hashem Elokecha Chatira Es is the Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim, and Oisam is the Es HaMitzvahs. Aleph Vav Mem is Es, and it's above Mem. So it's them and the mitzvahs, which is referring to the Sanhedrin. Pinchas, when it says Pinchas in the pasuk, it refers to in every generation Jem Mashuach Malchama Uchlei HaKodesh, because it says that in the pasuk as well. Ze Aron v'Luchos Shabai. This is the Aron and the Luchos in the Aron. V'Chatzotzos Hatrua, and when it says in the pasuk V'Chatzotzos Hatrua, Elo HaShofros, it's referring to the shofars. So that's how we would go to war. And it was sometimes comical. They would come with their weaponry and their manpower, and we would come with our Aron Kodesh. So Taka looks funny, And everyone knows the famous story that in the times of the Haskalah, the Pariah would want to make fun of the traditional Jewish way of life. So one of their favorite what's it called when they do a show about a scene? When there's a comedy show about a scene, there's a word for it. One of their favorite scenes
Skits.
was no, it's not a skit. It's like it's a word that connotates an illustration of something. But let's call it a skit. Would be acting out the Kohen's announcement to Klal Yisrael. So the scene would open up where there's two armies facing each other: the Goyish army, which is big and strong, and the Jewish army, which is full of like yeshiva bachim. And suddenly the Kohen would say, "Whoever built a house, go home," and a third of the other went home. Whoever got married, go home, and another big proportion of Eden went home. Whoever planted a garden, and then another portion goes home. Whoever's afraid, because they did a verse. Everybody ends up leaving. The only people remaining are two people. And in each community, they picked the two Gedolim of that generation. And then everyone's already laughing at how foolish it looks, fighting a war, and there's two elderly Eden with long white beards. And then one Gadol told the other Gadol, Ich bin eich mechabed mis the erste Schuss. Here's the spear, I'm mechabed you with the first throw, with the first shot. And he would go back and forth, being mechabed each other, who is going to throw out the first spear. And while this is going on, the audience is rolling over laughing at how foolish it looks. So they came to Reb Chaim Brisker and they said, you need to stop this. They're openly mocking Yiddishkeit. We have to get all the Frumme to boycott the theater because they're making fun of Frum people. And the Gadol says, I don't understand. Why? I think it was Reb Chaim Brisker. Why are you saying that? They're not mocking it at all. That's exactly what it looked like. The only thing they're doing wrong is they're closing off the scene at that point. The next scene is that we won. So that's exactly what it looked like, but we win. Okay. Zok to Gemara. How do we learn? Loy lechinam holach Pinchas l'milchama. Pinchas didn't go fight for no reason at all. Elo lifara din avi imai. He went to fight. But it's not Pashup Shot, but he went to take revenge of the honor of his maternal grandmother. And before we go on, I just want to point out that the I don't know who writes this, but at the bottom of Toysus, number base, it says Me'elu atoysus lo matzasi yoser. I couldn't find any more Toysus. In other words, this is the end of Toysus for the rest of the Masechta. So now we're going to complete the Masechta. And our right hand is being held by Rashi, and our left hand is also going to be held by Rashi to take us through the last couple of letter of Gittin, of Sotah, that is. And if we miss Tosfos over the next couple of blot, we have nothing to worry about because Tosfos will come back with a vengeance in Gittin. So Zok to Gemara Vayter. So he went to claim the honor, to avenge the honor of his maternal grandfather. Shenemar, it says, which is indicating that that Pinchas was a grandchild of Yosef Atzadik. Remember the Pinchas mi Yosef Asi? Are you telling me Pinchas comes from Shevet Yosef? V'aksiv ve'alozor ben Aaron logach lem ibnois putia loyla isha. Does not mean he came from Yisrael. My love, the awesome Yisrael. Shepite magolim lavoidis kachavim. That Yisrael used to fatten up calves to serve in preparation to serve them to avoid Yisrael. Dr. Gemara Loi, mi Yosef shepitpet be Yisrael. When it says the nice putiel, it's referring to Yisrael, to Yosef, who pitpet as Rashi zilzel v'kivesh Yosef. Yosef was able to subdue and make a mocking and ignore the Yitzhar. How could you take B'nai Yosef? It was known that the Shvatim would make fun of Pinchas and say Re'isim when he came and he killed Zimri and Cosby. They said, "Look at that, Re'isim ben Putizel. Look at this guy, Ben Shapitain Ovi Imoy Agolim Lavais Gechovim." His maternal grandmother fattened up calves for Avodah Zarah. This guy is such a knacker. Him Yareg Nasi Yisrael. he's going to go and attack Zimri, how you talking? Ella, which will have to say is, if his father, his mother's father, his maternal grandfather is from Yosef, then we'll say Ime de Ime mi Yisrael. Then we'll say his maternal grandmother was from Yisrael. Or the Ime de Ime mi Yosef, then Avua de Ime mi Yisrael. So he basically had in him, Pinchas, some of the lineage of Yosef and some of the lineage of Yisrael. The economy, and it makes sense, Putiel, which is plural, Prei Mashma. So it's two Putiels. It's one grandfather was Pite Magalim, and the other grandfather was Pite Yitzray. Prei Mashma, Shema Amina. Okay, gewaltig. Before we go weiter, being that today I came on time, I just want to share with you some interesting factoids about the Meshulach Muhammad. So the first child in the Rishonim about the Kohen Meshulach Muhammad that we learned yesterday was, what type of a Milchama are we talking about where you go through this process? Is it a Mechemes Mitzvah or is it a Mechemes Rishus? And it's very relevant because a lot of nafkaminas come out about it. Because if it's a Mechemes Mitzvah, you would have thought by a Mechemes Mitzvah, no matter who you are, you have to go fight. But if you learn that this only applies, if you learn that Meshulach Muhammad even applies to a Mechemes Mitzvah, then they'd have to go. Then you see clearly, even by a Mechemes Mitzvah, these people are excused from going into battle. So that's a big nafkamina as to whether or not this process applies to a Mechemes Mitzvah as well, or maybe it only applies to a Mechemes Rishus. That's item number one. Item number two is the Minchas Chinuch brings down that we know that we learned in the Mishnah, Ein bein meruba begadim le meshuach b'shemen hamishcha. I don't think I'm saying it right. There's no difference.
Are you letting item number one hang?
I'm letting item number one hang. It's a machlekes rishonim.
What about afilu kalatachas chupasei? Whatever happened to that?
I don't know. I don't know.
For Mechemes Mitzvah.
But we're soon going to see. We're soon going to see that it might not be a stira, because there's different levels of not going to war, which we're going to see today. There's one level of they stay home, they don't leave at all, and there's another level of they don't go into active battle, but they do have to do administrative duties in the war. So it could be even if a kala has to go out, it could still fit into our Gemara, because maybe what she's doing is she's doing administrative. Because we're going to see that these many people that were dismissed from war are actually on administrative leave.
Yeah, well, most of the army are in the
fighters,
background anyway. They're not in. Most of the army are not combat troops.
Right. And in the Gemara, we're going to see that they have to work in the mess hall.
Right.
Okay. So let's see. The second issue that we had to discuss was the only way to become a Meshulach Muhammad would be to get smeared with the Shemen HaMishcha. A Kohen Gadol used to get smeared with the Shemen HaMishcha, but in the second base of Mikdash, after the Shemen HaMishcha was hidden away, we no longer had it. So the only kedusha to distinguish a Kohen Gadol was Meruba Begadim. He wore 8 Begadim instead of 4, which means that the Kohen Meshuach ceased to exist in the second base of Mikdash, because they didn't have Shemen HaMishcha anymore. And the Minchas Chinuch asked a kasha from a story that's related to us by Yosifan, who was a historian. There are those who say that he even fought with Klal Yisrael. He was a Kohen, and he fought in some of the wars of the Chashmonaim, but he went off to Derech, and he ended up becoming a historian. But his recordings of what happened, his records and his writings are very accepted. So the Minchas Chinuch asks, in Yosifan it says that the Meshulach Muhammad went out to fight, when they were fighting the Chashmonaim. Frank the Minchas Chinuch, it's impossible, because there was no Shemen HaMishcha, so there was no Kohen HaMashiach. So the
Josephus was under the Romans. He fought in the Roman period, not in the Chashmonaim.
I'm sorry. So that was later. That was earlier.
Well, he was a historian. He was actually a Jewish general who defected to the Romans.
Right. So that did that occur before the Chashmonaim or after the Chashmonaim?
Chashmonaim was the Hanukkah story. That's long before.
Oh, it's long before. Okay, so he fought with the Romans. So he writes about the Kohen coming with the Shemin HaMishra by the Chashmonaim. So, how is that possible? How is that possible? There was no Shemin HaMishra. So he says, of course, Yosy doesn't mean he was literally a Kohen HaMashiach. What it means is he was he was in that position. He was leading the army, but he wasn't literally Mashiach. They did not have Shemin HaMishra in those days. But you see how highly regarded the words of Yosy are. Then the other shaila is, does a Kohen HaMashiach, normally a Kohen HaMashiach does not wear Meruba Begadim. He has halachas of Kuna Gedolah. He's not allowed to marry an almana, and he's not metamet to anybody, just like a Kohen Gadol isn't, but he doesn't wear Shmoyne Begadim. Although there are small portions of time where he will wear Shmoyne Begadim. And that is, when Klal Yisrael was being shoyal and eitzah by the Urim V'Tumim, whether or not they should go to war, and whether or not they would succeed, that was done through the Kohen HaMashiach. So for that process, the Kohen HaMashiach would put on the Shmoyne Begadim, and he would ask the Urim V'Tumim. The other question is, was he just a chaplain, so he made the speech, or did he actually lead Klal Yisrael to war? Did he actually go in battle? Was he actually the general? Was he actually in charge of the strategies and the battle plans? So there's a Gemara in Nazir that we learned. What if there's a Skan Kohen Gadol that's in trouble, and there's a Kohen HaMashiach that's in trouble? Who should you rescue first if you only have the opportunity to rescue one of them? And the Gemara tells us the Kohen HaMashiach, because he leads us into battle. And the Rush speaks out that not only does he lead us into battle, he's also in charge of every battle plan. So this Kohen HaMashiach wasn't just a figurehead. He was a skilled tactical genius that was in charge of the whole strategy of the war. And because of this, there's a Rambam that talks about when a post is yarshin or not. So for instance, the Kuna Gedolah, he's a figurehead. His duties will transfer to his son, Yerusha. A Rav or a Melech goes Yerusha. Zok the Rambam, the position of Kohen HaMashiach does not go Yerusha, because it's not just a figurehead. It's someone who's actually planning and fighting and making the plans for the war. And that you need a real qualified person, not necessarily the son of the person who was doing it before. Like the Polish Yidden told me when I came to Toronto after Lakewood and they went into the heating business, they told me, they sind nicht kan Gemüde, they darf man kennen. So in English, that this is not a Gemara. This you ought to really know. So the same thing with the Kohen HaMashiach. This it's not just a covet, it's something that you really got to know what you're talking about. That's the other thing about the Kohen HaMashiach. The last thing I want to share is a fascinating approach. Our whole approach to war is very unlike the Goyim, like we learned. It was with Nisim and as portrayed in that skit that we were talking about. So if you look in Shoftim, twice does the pasuk talk about going to war. So the first time is in Parsha Shoftim, and that's when it goes through the process of those people who are sent back. But what does it say? If you noticed, Oyevecha is spelled with one yud, not with a second yud. But if you go to Kiseitse, which is where the pasuk talks about the Fastayar, well, Shoftim is the first place. But if you go to the second place which mentioned, I'm sorry. But if you go to Kiseitse, so in Shoftim it's spelled without a second yud. But if you go to Kiseitse, then you will find that it's spelled differently. And in Kiseitse, it also says Kiseitse la Malchama, but this is referring to the story of the Fastoyer. It says Kiseitse la Malchama, Allah Yevecha, there's that second yud after the base. So what is the difference? So the Mefarshim tell us that the difference is Oyevecha without a Yud, as mentioned in Shoftim, means you're standing up against a single enemy. Oyevecha with a Yud means you're standing up against multiple enemies. When you're going to war, you have to have such rock solid bitachon in the Rebbeinu Shalom. No matter how many armies are attacking us from every direction, to us it's just one war, because the Rebbeinu Shalom, there's no difference to the Rebbeinu Shalom if the whole world is ganging up against us. If it's one small nation, to the Rebbeinu Shalom it's all the same. So it was pumped into their heads. Don't be afraid of whatever you're up against. Ayevecha, to the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's one oyev, and you'll have no problem winning over them. Oh, gewaltig. Do we say another pshat? Ayevecha means yitzhar. Person has to do tshuva. And in Kiseitze is speaking after the war. We won it, right? Kiseitze l'macholam ayevecha v'risha b'shivya, right? V'shavisha shivya. You won the war. You're taken captive. After the war, then when you're mishabeach to Rebbeinu Shalom, we have to appreciate the nace that Rebbeinu Shalom made for us. Yes, then we have to actually appreciate how big the threat was. So based on that, there's a very beautiful story. Before the 6-Day War, all of Eretz Yisrael, all of Judaism in the world, were afraid that we were on the verge of being wiped out. People were terrified. And the story goes that the Panovich Rav called up Levi Eshkol, the prime minister of Israel, and told him, we're in a war for our lives. If you want my entire yeshiva, I'll tell my whole yeshiva to gear up for battle. They can do basic training, and you could put them out on the front. So Levi Eshkol told the Panovich Rav, we don't need your students, because we're so severely outnumbered. There's no way we could win this in a natural way. We need Nisim. If we need Nisim, our best bet is to have your Talmidim sitting and learning, because the Schus HaTorah will protect us, and maybe then we'll be Zoichet to Nisim. That was Levi Eshkol's attitude towards the battle before the battle. After Israel won, it was one big orgy of Koichi v'Oisem Yodi, and there was no mention of the Nisim that we saw and that we won b'derech nes. So it's exactly the opposite of how we're really supposed to go to battle. We're supposed to go to battle without any fear, relying on the Rebbeinu Shalom. But after the battle, that's when we're supposed to talk about the great nes and the Yeshua that we had that was delivered to us by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Okay, with that we'll go back there. Zok the Heilige Mishnah weiter. The Dibra Shoytim Eloam Leimar. The Shoytim got up and they announced to the Am. So there's a little bit of confusion here. Is it the Shoytim speaking, or is it the Kohen HaMeshuach? So that's going to come out in the Gemara exactly how this happened. The Dibra Shoytim Eloam Leimar. If someone built a house and didn't have a chance to move in and get comfortable there, let him go home. Why he might die and he'll lose that opportunity. So the halacha is, if you built a house that's just made to store straw in, or beis habokar, a barn, beis ha'etzim, a holzkammer, a place where you store firewood, beis ha'oitris, a place where you store wines and oils. It doesn't matter if you built, or if you bought such a building, or if you yarshin such a building, or if he got it as a gift. Doesn't make a difference how he acquired it. If he acquired it and he didn't have a chance to use it, he gets to go home from the Milchama. What if he planted a vineyard? We're going to see means, we know the first 3 years that pears grow, it's called Orla, they're also Mana. The 4th year is Nati Revai, and you have to be Machal them, you have to redeem them. So who planted a kerem and did not have it yet for 4 years? It doesn't make a difference if it's a kerem, a vineyard, or if it's other type of plants. Or any one of the 5 minim. It doesn't make a difference if you planted it, or if you were mavrich. The definition of mavrich is you take a branch off a tree, it's an older tree, you want to rejuvenate it, and you drag it down into the ground, and then you turn it up again. So you're sort of making a new tree out of that limb, and once it starts to grow and flourish, then you'll cut it off from the old tree. So mavrich is, in a way, planting a new tree. A market, once again, you take an older tree, and you take one of its branches, and you bend it over, and you shave off its bark, you open up its raw inside, and you cut a hole in another younger tree, and you force that branch into that tree. You force them together, and they start bonding and forging together, which will add new life. I'm sorry, it's called grafting. That's right. So or if you bought a tree, or if you inherited a tree, and then the it doesn't matter if she's a psula. Even if he has a shemeres yovim, shoma shemesh achiv or echav b'milchama, or even if he finds out in the middle of war that his brother died, so now he is in a position of being a yavim. Chayzer, he goes back. Chayzer u'balai, he has to go back from the archei milchama, and we'll see what he does. Elu be'elu, the Bach takes it out. Elu shaymin divrei kohen. Okay. So the Bach takes this out. It's just shoving the archei milchama. Let's just quickly see the Lashon Bach. Here we are. Kol elu shaymin. Right. All of these people listen to the announcement of the kohen divrei kohen me'archei milchama, and they b'chayzrin. And what do? They're not free to go home. They still have to join the army efforts. U'misavkin mayim u'mozoin. They have to provide food and drink, so they work in the mess hall. U'misaknin hadrachim. And they also have to fix the roads because they need good roads to be able to launch their attack. But now I'll give you a list of people who don't get the exemption. Number one, you didn't build a house, you just built a porch. When we're past it, or if you only planted 4 trees, not 5 trees, or even 5 trees, but they were not trees that produced fruit. Somebody who married a woman, but it was a woman that he was already married to once prior, who he's not allowed to remain married to her, all of these are loyal yachayzer because those aren't marriages that need to be nurtured. What if somebody has a house that collapsed and he rebuilt it exactly as per its original specifications? That's not a new bias, and you're not chayzer me'ercha malchama for that either. If you build a brick house in a place like Sharon that had terrible, terrible soil, and buildings would not last more than 5 years in that place, that's not a simcha as well. So for such a building, now these people weren't chayzer. You have a list of people who are not chayzer, who have to fight the war. We have people who are chayzer, but chayzer doesn't mean they walk free. Chayzer means they have to. If you think about it, if they know that they just built a house, why do they have to wait for the kohen? Let them not go out in the first place. The terrorists, they have to mobilize. They have to mobilize and get their exemption from the kohen when he's making this announcement, because the exemption doesn't mean he goes home. The exemption means you're going to be sent to do different work. Rather than be in active battle, you're going to be providing administrative services. But Elu Shein Zazimim Kaimim. There's a group of people who don't even go out to war in the first place. They don't mobilize at all. And that is Bonabais Vichanachai. If you built a house and you just moved into it and you didn't live in it long enough, so there you're going to go back. So you just moved into a new house, but you didn't live there a year yet. There you don't even go out to war. I'm sorry. But once again, his 4th year is not over yet. Or someone who just made Nisun on his Arusa, or Kanesh Shivimtoi, these people don't even go out to battle at all. They're totally exempt. He has to be free and clear to his home, to his wife, for a full year. We darshan his house So if he built a new house and he moved in, he has to stay there. Yiyah, it says Naki Yiyah Levesa. Yiyah Zek Karmoy. That's referring to even if he planted a vineyard. And Vesimachas Ishtoi, Zu Ishtoi, Asher Lokach, Lohavi Es Yevimtoi, even if it's a Yevama that also counts that he doesn't go to war. And these people who are completely exempt, Ein must speak in Mayim Amazon, they misakin as Hadrachim, they're completely exempt from going to war. Tanu Rabbanan, V'dibur HaShoitim, Yachol Dvarim Shal Atzmon, you might think that the Shoitrim, when they speak, are saying their own shtickle, and they're not just representing the Kohen. So this is what I asked earlier. Is it the Shoitrim speaking or is it the Kohanim speaking? So the Gemara is going to tell us they're speaking on behalf of the Kohen. Later on, the Shoitrim say their own information. But this announcement was on behalf of the Kohen. It must be they're used to publicize the wording of the Meshuach Melchama. Okay, Kohen medaber v'shoiter mashmiya. The Kohen says the word, and the shoiter publicizes it and broadcasts what the Kohen said. Tanichada, we had one brayso that said Kohen medaber v'shoiter mashmiya, which would refer to our case here. V'taniyidich Kohen medaber v'Kohen mashmiya. So where is that? The Taniyidich shoiter medaber v'shoiter mashmiya. Amar by Hakeitzad mivinigesh ad v'dibur Kohen. At the beginning of the parsha, it starts off that v'nigesh the Kohen approaches Klal Yisrael. So all that is done by the Kohen himself. We'll see the pasuk was quoted over here. It says, it over here. There's a lashon of v'nigesh, the beginning of the war. Let me see if I can find the pasuk. I can't find the pasuk now, but the pasuk says in that part of V'nigesh. It's a little late, so I don't want to go looking for the pasuk, but it's right there in Shoiftim. Okay, I apologize. So it says V'nigesh. So it's from the beginning, from V'nigesh ad v'dibru koyin, ad v'dibru is koyin medaber v'koyin mashmiya. There, the koyin is doing all the work. V'dibru ad v'yisufu is the part of making the announcement of whoever has one of these situations goes back. That's koyin medaber. The koyin says it, but the shoiter mashmiya, the shoiter publicizes it and gets the word out. And v'yisufu v'elech, that shoiter medaber v'shoiter mashmiya. That's the shoiter's words. So it says v'yasur shoiter medaber lam v'omer v'omer miya isha yorei v'rach leva v'yelech v'yashav l'veisoi. That's the shoitrim talking themselves. But the first part, miya ish, is referring to what they were told from the kohen to say over. Which from Dibur Shoitim and all was that, but before that, it says V'nigesh, that was the kohen himself talking. That's when they told him, you're coming out of Mochama on your enemies, and you shouldn't be afraid. That's the part that the kohen said directly. Zok to Gemara. Miyesh Shabbat Bayis Chodesh. Tanu Rabbanon. The Rabbanon taught us. Asher Bona. Ainly Ela Asher Bona. I would only know that he built it. Lokach v'yoresh v'nitin le'b'tadaminayin. How do you know he acquired a house in any of these alternative ways? How do you know that he's also going to go back from the Muhammad? Miha ish Asher Bona. Miha ish Asher Bona. And it says over here, it did not say Miya ish Asher Bona, just Asher Bona. Miya ish means that it's more inclusive. As Rashi explains, Rashi says Ribuya the Machal Mich of Mi Asher Bona. Why they stick Miya ish Asher Bona? To tell you that even if this person has other conditions and it's not a full house, okay, and even if he got it through other ways, it still lets him go back. Asher Bona Mikamakam Yachab Shanimar Ba'afa Bona Bei Sharach Sadres. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a line. Ainly alabayis, minoin l'rabis, beis hateven, beis habaku, beis eitzim, beis ha'idrus. Tamblemer asher bona mikol mokum. So the second diak zok Rashi comes from the fact with loiksiv asher bayis bona, rather it says asher bona bayis. We darshan asher bona. He built anything and then the descriptor bias. So the asher bana connotate that it's not strictly limited to a house; it's a more broad bana, no matter what he built, or almost everything that he built as far as a house. When we pass it, what if it's just a doorway or a porch? Talmud Loimar bias. We still learn from bias. Ma bias ladira, I've called ladira. It has to be something that's a full shelter, not a beishar chsad and a merpet. Bias k'mashmoy davka a house. So he's much more restrictive in what lets someone go back, and it says loy chanach v'loy chanachai. It doesn't say v'loy chanach. It says v'loy chanachai, which is again more limiting. Prat legazlan. It tells you that if you stole a house, you can't say, "Hey, I just got a new house. I can't go to war." If you stole that house, it must be that the Rebbe Yaakov's or this stickle of loy chanach v'loy chanachai is not consistent with Rabbi Yosy Glili. The Rabbi Yosy Glili, Rabbi Yosy Glili said that when it says that's someone who's afraid to go to war because he knows he has a virus. This fellow who stole a house, why are we declaring whether or not he goes back? He goes back anyway. Never mind because of his house, because he did an aver he stole. Zok to Gemara, no, afilu temi Rabbi Yosy Glili. Maybe in fact this even goes with the Rabbi Yosy Glili. Why does he need this miyut of bayis hagozel? If he's a gazel anyway, he doesn't go to Muhammad. To go into a tshuva v'yavdama. It's speaking where he did tshuva and he paid for it. So now that he bought it, you might think that he goes back from the Muhammad because now it's a new house to him that he purchased. But fact the Gemara, if he bought it, so then he's a regular purchaser. He did tshuva, so he should go back. So why are we medayik from V'lo Chanach? He doesn't go back. Since we originally stole the property, even though now he retroactively corrected the situation by paying for it, once the house was originally acquired through Gzela, he no longer is chosher me'archel macham. If you actually planted it, lokach v'yarish v'nitin lebevatanim minayin tamid loimer umiya'ish, the same diuk as before. Asher nota kerem ainli la kerem minayin l'rabbis chamisha lo nimaychol. How do you know about the other 5 types of food trees? Vafilu mishar minin, or even other minin. Talmud loymar, asher nota mikol moked. Yoch shani marba hanetea arba iloli michael. What if it's only 4 ilonim, not 5, or chamish lo nisrak? Talmud loymar kerem, and the configuration of a kerem, as we saw in the picture on Amar Aleph, is 2 rows of 2 and then 1 in the center. That's the normal configuration of a kerem. And therefore, since it says kerem, even though we're not limiting it to only wine, only grapes, we're opening it up to all types of trees, but it has to be 5 trees, and that's what we learn from kerem. Zok to Gemara, Rebbe Yaakov Omer kerem kameshmoy. Dafka kerem, only if it's a kerem, any other fruit tree, he will not go back or chamochama. Similar to by bias, Rebbe Yaakov said dafka bias. He limits it to what the pasuk says. Loy chilal v'loy chilaloi. Once again, there's a miyut. It says v'loy chilaloi. Could have said v'loy chilal. So it's obviously coming to be b'mayit cases. Prat the mavrich u'lamarkid. Those things would not be choshem me'ercha machama. Correct the Gemara. V'hanant nan echad anateya v'echad amavrich v'echad amarkid. Did we not learn the Mishnah? It says that those things do allow you to return back from the Muhammad. Amar b'zeiram abchista loy kasher. Kam bar kavas hizer, kam bar kavas heter. Sometimes you're allowed to, sometimes you're not allowed to. Harkavas heter is an older one and a younger tree. Harkavas iser is when you're mixing 2 minim. That's not allowed. So if you're mixing 2 minim, that's not allowed. That's where the Brisa says that he's not choshem moyachal mochama. Where does the Mishnah say you are choshem moyachal mochama if it was a harkavas heter? Take the more higher harkavas heter hechidami. What exactly did you do? You took a young tree and you grafted it into another tree. Correct the Gemara. Why do I say because it's grafted? Because I grafted the second tree into the first tree. That's why I don't go to Muhammad. What about my first tree? My first tree alone prevents me from going to Muhammad. If he has one tree that's a yalda, that's a young tree that he wasn't mechal, so that of course he doesn't have to go to war. What's the difference if he grafted a second tree to it? What does it add? Ella yalda bezkena. what if you grafted a young tree into an old tree? The old tree would not have exempted him from going to war. Zok Gemara, how could you say that? If you graft a young tree into an old tree, that branch that up until now was susceptible to arla because it never gave out fruit, once it's connected and grown and part of the old tree, it has all the halachas of an old tree. So therefore, you shouldn't even be chayzer for such a type of graft. So we need to know what type of graft is it that the grafting caused it that I shouldn't go to Muhammad. It's a young tree. But the first young tree already patters you from going to Muhammad. When do you say if you have a fruit tree and you're not in the fourth year that you were chayzer? That's if the purpose of that tree that you planted it for was to produce pears. But what if you had a breach in your gate, a breach in your wall, and you planted a tree there to fill the space, but you didn't care about fruit? So even though it's a mature fruit tree, or even if it's not a mature fruit tree, no matter what it is, it wouldn't impact you going to Muhammad because we don't look at it like a fruit tree. If you plant to use as wood or as a closing a fence, patim in the arla that does not have the halachas of arla. So therefore, you had this young tree, you grafted an old tree into it. The part of the old tree that you grafted into the new tree, that part you're doing for pears. So the actual tree that you grafted into, even though it doesn't produce pears, it wouldn't part you from Muhammad, just like there wouldn't be an Isser Arla on it. But the branch of the older tree that you grafted into it, now it takes on the form of a Yalda, and that's why you return Merech Muhammad. We said that if you graft a young tree into an old tree, it's now potter from Arla, and therefore you wouldn't be Chayz Merech Muhammad. And why by Yolda B'Yolda, the loy bottle? Why do we say that it's not bottle? We should say that it's bottle to the other tree. And once again, if it's bottle to the other tree, and the other tree was not made for fruit, it was made as a barrier to grow wood, that doesn't pass you to Muhammad, but you grafted into it shouldn't either. Dr. Gemara, you're right. If you change your mind, what if you graft, you have an old tree and you graft into it, that won't let you go back. You can't change the fact that it's old. But when you're grafting from a tree that's young into a tree that's mature, if you graft from a tree that's young to another tree that's young, that will allow you to be chayil Muhammad. The tree that you're only using for wood, you could technically change your mind and now use it for fruit. The moment you change your mind and now use it for fruit, it's going to be mechuyev and arla, and therefore it will impact the branch that you graft into it. So even though now you didn't change your mind and you're still not planning to use this tree as a fruit tree, the branch that you grafted into it becomes a yalda. It's mechuyev and arla, and they will pat you from going to Muhammad. Why? Because the base tree that you grafted into, you could also make it mechuyev and arla by changing your mind and deciding to use it. But if the base tree is an old tree, no matter what you do, that old tree will never be mechuyev and arla. That old tree will never be mechayev you or pat you from going to Muhammad. Therefore, grafting into that will become batal. The hameikara lepeir kain, because of course it was made for pears, the older tree. Midi the hava olu me'elein. It's no different than a tree that grew by itself that you didn't plant, a wild tree that grew by itself. It's not we learned olu me'elein. If a tree grew by itself, chayovin ba'arla, it's mechuyev in arla. Okay, it's 6:52, so we'll have to stop here. These are long blatter, and the Mishnah will be mamshach tomorrow, and we'll finish the blat tomorrow. Bez Hashem. We didn't finish the blot because I couldn't control myself.